Welcome to another episode of Esoterica, the podcast, where we discuss the obscure, offbeat, and unusual. I'm Chris Schultz.
And I'm Aaron Christian.
And today's episode is brought to us by Greendale Community College, your path to a brighter future. Greendale Community College is an open admissions college with over 80 unique fields of study. Courses include antics, film, advanced claims denial, education, law, opinions, physical education, intro to senselessness, and many more. Greendale will blow your mind and body. Won't you get to know us better? Greendale Community College voted second best by greendaleCommunityCollege.com. Why should you go to Greendale? That's easy. Greendale has the most advanced typing class in the southwestern Greendale area, and now you can register by fax. Go Greendale. So how's it going, Aaron?
Things are going well.
We're back to our regular album discussions.
We are.
Here.
Yeah, so it's getting closer to the spooky season. You know, we're about, I think, a week out, I think tomorrow is October 1st.
Oh, yes. I got confused because we're recording in the
past. But tomorrow is October 1st. We're getting into the spooky season, so I think this is a good album review today. Chris.
Yes. So we're going to take a listen to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds' 9th studio album, Murder Ballads, released in 1996. This is a collection, as the title suggests, of new and traditional murder ballads, a genre of songs that relays the details and often consequences of crimes of passion.
Crimes of passion.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite Nick Cave albums. The neat thing about Nick Cave is he has gone and spanned the spectrum of music from punk to goth to he sort of transcends genres at this point. This album sort of it's unique because it's all murder ballads, as we started to say. So the cool thing about this is I did a little research when thinking about talking about this album into what murder ballads are, and it's an entire subgenre of the traditional ballad. As a songwriter, you're familiar with ballads being a narrative lyrics telling a story. And murder ballads date all the way back to like early English traditions, and a lot of them, they're like folklore where there's a song that may be 400 or 500 years old and just gets updated occasionally.
Right. I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and one of the things there's a couple of tracks on here that I actually have heard the original or at least older versions of it. And in fact, maybe we'll throw a snippet on. There's this fantastic, if you're interested in ballads or folk music in general, there's an amazing collection called the Anthology of the American Folk Music, which was released in 1952. It's 4 volumes of American folk tunes collected from the 20s and 30s. And a couple of the songs on here, there's original versions worth checking out.
Cool.
So, we want to break down into this album?
Yeah, let's dive right into it.
All right. So, the first track, I get so many windows open in my browser right now. All right. So, the first track is called
That was a long song.
That was, and there was no joy in it other than
the
character joy.
I mean, certainly the effect of the monotone, just kind of dreary sound had an impact.
I know it's the instruments in the background. Like I can totally picture a dark, sort of windy, cold night, and talking to this strange guy on my doorstep.
It almost like instrumentally. Think of last week when we did Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino. Mm-hmm. Like, I think musically there's similarities there.
I can see that.
You know, that's kind of like stripped down sort of sound. You know, it's not blaring in your face. It's just kind of this
soundscapes.
Yeah, it definitely soundscapes.
Soundscapes. So the next track is one that you were familiar with. I remember I irresponsibly introduced you to
very much
many years ago. Stagger Lee, which has been recorded approximately 468 times by various people since at least like the 1920s.
Yep.
Nick Cave has probably one of the most colorful
Quite colorful
versions. Although, interestingly enough, in reading some of the annotations on the lyrics, most of what he's describing and the phrases he uses come from either earlier renditions of the song, or there was also a poem that was written. So what I would have attributed the uniqueness of Nick Cave is not necessarily his. So
yeah, and I remember listening to an earlier version of this and then listening to this, and I'm like, what?
Yeah,
so it's worth it.
this is a thing. So let's dive into Stagger Lee.
I'm a bad motherfucker, don't you know? And I'll crawl over 50 good pussies just to get to one fat boy's asshole, said Stagger Lee. Just then Billy rolls in, he says you must be a mad motherfucker called Stagger Lee.
So that's probably one of the weirdest flexes ever.
Yeah, that's like the second worst song I've ever heard ever. Like,
And-
not content wise, like it's a good song, just lyrically.
Yeah. And, I know badasses like to brag, but if somebody threw down on me, I'd crawl over 50 good pussies just to get to one fat boy's asshole. Like, I put a pin in it. I'm done. I don't know how to respond to that.
There's no way to respond to that. There's certain things people say that you just can't. You just can't.
Yeah. It's okay.
And that's one of them.
So interesting little factoid about this song. That screaming at the end, that was done by Bad Seeds guitarist Blixa Bargeld. He's like a 6'4", 200-pound German guy.
Oh my God.
And not what you would imagine when you hear that shrieking.
No.
So as I mentioned before we listened to this song, there's around 468 known versions of this song.
Right.
So just for a counterpoint, if you want to listen to real quick, Stagger Lee, which is a 1927 version by Frank Hutchison. So we'll play a little clip of that. Just give people an idea of the polar opposite,
Yeah.
ends of the song. So here's that.
All in alley, one dark and drizzling eye. Billy Lyons and Stagger Lee had one terrible fight all about. That John B. said, Johnny. Stagger Lee walked to the barroom and it called a glass of beer.
Very different vibe.
Yeah.
Very, very different. For sure.
So
Definitely
the
a blues song.
Yeah. And it's funny. Like I've heard Pacific Gas and Light does a version. I think Tom Jones recorded it. All just completely different. It's the basic story is the same. It's an African American folklore story about Stagger Lee basically getting in a fight with this Billy Lyons or Billy Dilly guy and shooting him in the head.
Yeah.
And it can either be that simple or as complex as Mr. Cave makes it.
Interesting.
So the next track is also a traditional murder ballad, Henry Lee. PJ Harvey and Nick Cave.
A different vibe for this Lee song.
Yes, yeah. And so they did a music video for this, and I don't know if Nick Cave and PJ Harvey had met up before that, but the video is just basically them very close to each other's faces, singing at each other. It's very intimate, and it's very sensual without being, I don't know, like erotic. They're fully dressed. There's nothing overly sexualized about it, but it's definitely very sensual. They ended up having a very intense 4-month relationship after recording that song or that video. I think they kind of fell for each other. And his album that followed this, he wrote after he came out of rehab, and about half that album was about falling in love and breaking up with PJ Harvey. And
Oh, wow.
And it was interesting because Nick Cave has always, throughout his career, been a balladeer. And the album about PJ is just this nakedly stark, personal songs that sort of reinvented the artist. So that's an aside, if you will.
Interesting.
So, also a traditional folk song, and I actually have a recording of Henry Lee from 1932 by Dick Justice. We'll give that a quick spin just to get a little different feel.
Get down, little Henry Lee, and stay all night with me. The very best lodging I can afford will be.
Best superhero name ever.
It is
Dick Justice.
the Justice League. Oh yeah, different. Who cares about the song anymore?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So for the record, I mean our listeners can hear it. It sounds very similar. It's not. There's not a huge difference like there is with Stagger Lee versus Stagger Lee. So our next track is "Lovely Creature."
There she stands, this lovely creature. There she stands with her hair full of ribbons and green gloves on her head.
I really enjoyed that song.
Yeah, touching back on the soundscape idea, I really like these songs are very atmospheric. There's just this pervasive sense of dread that comes through. And I sort of like these murder ballads that are sung from the perspective of the murderer, because you have that sort of unreliable narrator thing going on where he's not necessarily being like the first song, the Song of Joy. Like the guy's trying to tell you that somebody came in and murdered his family. He fucking murdered his family.
Right. Interesting. Different perspectives for sure.
The next song, Where the Wild Roses Grow, is also a duet, and this was between Nick Cave and Kylie Minogue. Okay, before we go any further, I want to take a minute to talk about the awesome folks at Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way. In fact, it's the way that we make a podcast. Let me explain.
It's free.
There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more.
And you can make money from your podcast. Best part, no minimum listenership.
Ooh. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
It's so cool. We found the service. We started using it. We're making podcasts.
Yeah, making podcasts, making money, having a good time.
So listen, you want to get you out there. You want to be heard. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Thank you.
I love how this song is sung from the perspective of both the killer and the victim. And they have different interpretations of what's happening.
Yeah, and it's almost like an Irish song.
You
know, it's got that yeah, you know what I mean.
One of my favorite moments with this song was many, many years ago. Oh, probably around 96 or 97 when it came out. I was upstairs stapling boxes at work with Tom, and I know you've heard people at work talk about Tom.
Yes.
We were listening to the song, and he's a jokester, and as the song was progressing, he's like, or when it got to the part of the murder, and she's singing, and he goes, he just starts singing himself, "Oh, I picked up a rock and smashed her head in," and then like the next line was, "I picked up the rock and smashed in her head," and he's like, "What?" It's pretty funny.
Well, that's hilarious.
So this next song, "The Curse of Mill Haven," this is definitely got a different feel to it. As you'll see right away, it's probably the most. It's kind of silly. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
It enjoys itself. The Curse of Mill Haven.
I live in a town called Millhaven, and it's small, and it's mean, and it's cold. But if you come around just as the sun goes down, you can watch the whole thing turn to gold. It's around then that I used to go a-roaming.
So Crazy Lottie.
Crazy Lottie.
Definitely a fun, rollicking tune.
Rollicking. What a word.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think the whole album is steeped in a dark black humor
Yeah.
for sure. But this song is just like balls out funny, I mean, it's
balls
still
out funny.
Yeah, it's still
for Schultz.
serious content, but it's having fun with itself. As I
Yeah.
said. And there's just some gruesome murders in there.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun. The next song is The Kindness of Strangers. This one, I don't know. It's funny because the last song was kind of silly a bit. This song hits me in the feels. I don't know what it is about it, but I came up with an idea for a great music video or even just a short film revolved around this song. So let's take a listen to The Kindness of Strangers.
They found Mary Bellows cuffed to the bed, with a rag in her mouth and a bullet in her head. Oh, Mary Bellows.
So ironic title to the song.
Yeah. I can see how it hits you in the feels, though.
It might be the crying in the background.
Yeah, that was kind of creepy, but it made sense.
Well, and there's this feeling of, I don't know, inevitable doom in the song. Like of course, at this point, at 7 tracks into an album about murder ballads, like you know it's not going to end well.
Yeah.
But the idea I came up with for, I guess, a music video for this is I got fascinated with the idea between when a crime is committed, murder, obviously it's violent and terrible.
Yeah.
But there's a period of time in between the commission of the murder and the discovery of the murder that's just quiet, nothing.
Right.
So I got fascinated with the idea of this, just like a black and white shots of the inside of this hotel room with her body on the bed and the breeze blowing the curtain and nobody knowing that she's there dead yet. And maybe at the end of the video, there's the knock of housekeeping on the door or something. But just that idea of that quiet time in between the commission of a crime and its discovery.
Interesting.
Kindness of Strangers. So it brings us to our next track, Crow Jane, track number 8. Let's give that a listen.
Crow Jane, Crow Jane, Crow Jane, Crow Jane, Crow Jane. While horrors in her head that her tongue dare not name.
So that's a dark tune.
Yeah.
Gang raped by 20 minors. And then she takes her revenge.
Well, I mean, if you were... Okay.
Yeah. I do love the line, we just fitted out a girl who looked like a bird, measured 32, 44, 38. So instead of being, her hip and breast measurement, those are calibers. It's pretty clever. I like that line. 32, 44, 38. Crow Jane. So we're at the second to last song, clocking in at 14 minutes and 29 seconds is O'Malley's Bar. And this is just a delightfully depraved ditty. A delightfully depraved ditty.
This is a quarter of an hour long song. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, and the album comes in under an hour, so this is like the bulk of the album here.
And most of the album is just this one track.
Yeah, and I think if I remember reading correctly, this is the song that inspired the album. He came up with this and then built an album around it because he didn't have a album that this fit on by itself.
Right.
So
Interesting way of doing it.
yeah. So O'Malley's Bar.
Neighbors, I cried, friends, I screamed, I banged my fists upon the bar. I bear no grudge against you, and my dick felt long and hard. I am the man for which you know.
O'Malley's Bar.
I think I need a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it did occur to me that it might have taken longer to sing that song than it would actually for that murder spree to occur.
I'm sure.
Because it seems like most mass shootings are over within 5 minutes. So there's an extra 10 minutes of singing.
Yeah. Any song that's more than 6.5 minutes long, I have a hard time keeping my focus. I looked at the lyrics and I'm just like, no.
Yeah, and create like a just crazy, descriptive, grisly.
Yeah. And musically, like sometimes the keys would come in, but they wouldn't come in on time. And I mean, like it worked. It didn't sound bad, but like you could tell it would be like the music going on, and then like a half a beat later, the keys would come in.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I have a I have, other people have as well. There's a box set that Nick came out with a few years ago of B-sides and rarities, and there's like 4 or 5 different versions of this that were done on the radio. So cleaned up content wise, a lot of stuff was bleeped, but it seems almost like scatting. It's just sort of a free form thing, and he sings it with a loudspeaker, which I don't know why I have such a hard on for that sound. Like when people sing through a loudspeaker, just it's got a cool sound.
It's almost like, except you can actually make out what it's saying, but like Yellow Ledbetter by Pearl Jam, where like he doesn't know what the lyrics are, but they're just there and it's a good song. Yeah. And you know, I mean, you know what the words are here, but it's just kind of like after a while it becomes that where you're just like, I don't know what he's saying, but there's murder going on.
Yeah. And I kind of like inarticulate singing. One of my favorite U2 songs is always Elvis Presley in America, and I swear to God I thought he was singing in Gaelic.
Really?
And then I was watching the video on YouTube. You know how sometimes YouTube has lyrics on the videos? There were lyrics, and as I read them and listened to them, I'm like, he's speaking English all this time. So after all these 9 songs of murder, told from various perspectives, we end with the cover of a Bob Dylan song, Death Is Not the End.
When you're sad and when you're lonely and you haven't got a friend, just remember that death is not the end.
So do me a favor.
Yes.
Unless something goes terribly awry, I will most likely shuffle off my mortal coil long before you. Make sure they play this song at my funeral.
Okay. Unless something goes awry.
Yeah. There's a natural order. You know. So that's a Bob Dylan song.
Yeah, I could tell it was a Bob Dylan song, but like not, hey, I love Dylan, hey.
Yeah, it's fine. Like I love Bob Dylan, and I'm not here to diss him, but everybody else sings his song so much better than he.
Everybody does. Yeah, he writes good songs, but just can't. Do them.
And I like that sort of fractured, non-traditional voice. And
right.
If you look at most of what I listen to, you know, Tom Waits is definitely an acquired taste. So I'm not discounting that, but yeah, it almost feels to me like Bob Dylan like really just doesn't give a shit. Like he knows the song's awesome, so he's like, yeah, whatever.
Especially at this point, I feel like earlier on he should have taken a little bit more. You know, and we're talking about Nick Cave. We're not talking about Bob Dylan.
Yes, that's true. And Nick Cave's got very interesting taste. There's actually an album I'd like to do at some point called Original Seeds, and it's the original versions of a lot of songs that Nick Cave has covered over his career or been inspired by and wrote a song based off of. It's an interesting album.
Interesting.
But anyway, so ending up Murder Ballads. It is kind of cool that you have this entire album about death and grisly murder and misery, and then the last track is this uplifting, hopeful song, which, again, I think speaks to the dark humor that runs through this entire album. I know, like, Nick Cave's got a fascination with Gothic Americana and the macabre, but I think he's also got a wicked sense of humor. So
yeah, I can see that.
This album doesn't take itself too seriously at the end of the day. So that was Murder Ballads. Definitely one of my all-time favorite Nick Cave albums. And that's it for this episode.
Yeah, so this is fun. This is great.
Getting into the spirit of the holiday.
Yeah, and speaking of getting into the spirit of the spooky season, I'll call it. Next week, we are going to be reviewing Famous Monsters Speak.
Yes.
Which, when I looked it up on Spotify, is by Dracula and Frankenstein. So we're going to roll with that.
That should be interesting.
It should be. So tune in next week to hear some famous monsters talk to us.
Until then, make sure to check out esotericthepodcast.com for all our posts, our social media.
Our t-shirts.
Our t-shirts. Please, if you're looking for an idea for a Halloween costume, go as one of your favorite local podcasters.
Yeah, or if you give Halloween presents.
That's right, because it's a holiday after all, and it's going to be weird this year because of COVID. So
yeah, so what better way than to wear an Esoterica the Podcast t-shirt?
$15 shirt, and you're not going to see them at that price again. So
never again.
Buy soon, buy often.
Until then,
stay esoteric.